We fight together today. We fight against the common foe as allies. A wartime partnership has sprung from a peacetime friendship, for we were always friends. You knew how we lived. Your school books told you about our flat country below the level of the sea, about wooden shoes and windmills and cleanliness and cheese. Many of you came to visit us to see our famous tulips, to delight in the gay costumes that brightened our market towns. This side of our lives was known to all the world. But there was another side that was harder to understand, though there were clues to it on the surface, in the canals and the dikes that bounded our fields. Perhaps their very charm concealed their real meaning. The key to the story is the map of Holland, a map that shows solid land and continuous shores where less than 300 years ago, clusters of islands rose in the ocean. One by one, we tied up this string of islands to the mainland by pushing back the ocean and making land where there had been sea. That is what the dikes are for, and also why they are the symbol of Holland's spirit. We Dutch have made our own country, physically as well as spiritually. We won it by conquest, but not conquest of our neighbors. We subdued the sea. We disciplined the elements and our own lives. How few of you know that we have continued the work right down to our own times. Yet in 1920, a great arm of the sea still penetrated the heart of Holland. The famous Zuiderzee still separated the northern peninsula from the mainland, threatening the dike walls and periodically overflowing in costly floods. But then we began the greatest of all our land reclamation projects. We were to bottle up the Zuiderzee with a great dike across its throat, according to a plan conceived by Cornelius Lely in 1890. The building of a great dike is a task of unbelievable complexity. Thousands of problems have to be considered and solved before the dike building is actually begun. The construction of brushwood mattresses, first major activity of the Zuiderzee project, was the solution of just such a problem. How to protect our new dike during its early stages from the fierce currents that flowed in the channels of the Zuiderzee? The answer? Great brushwood rafts, laboriously wrought by an army of simple craftsmen from materials growing along the shores of the sea itself. Branches woven into ropes, ropes woven into cables, cables woven into massive floating mattresses. Then came the task of towing the clumsy rafts to selected spots in the channels. Navigation and seamanship are just as much a part of dike building as engineering and construction. No step can be taken without consulting tide tables and weather forecasts. Dike builders must be sailors as well as artisans. At precise points in the sea, the rafts were first weighted with riprap and then sunk with heavier stones that had been brought along in barges. They would act as underwater bulwarks, deflecting the currents and thus making it possible to build a dam in the middle of the ocean. Then the actual dike was started, and we fought new difficulties in terms of tides and building materials. The base for the great seawall was heavy clay, boulder clay we called it, that we dredged from the bottom of the Zuider Zee itself. It had never been used before, but we had behind us a long tradition in the art of dealing with such problems. And so we experimented until we found the material suitable to our new requirements. For hundreds of years, we have been developing the skills and crafts, the equipment and engineering principles that we were now using on a colossal scale. By bargeful and by bucketful, the wall of clay began to grow, began to stretch out from opposite shores. But clay was not enough to withstand the great pressure of the water, even in those places where the current was weakest. A cross-section of the new wall reveals its structure. First, the clay was dumped in boatloads. Then more clay was dropped by floating cranes. The clay was to be reinforced by a great heap of sand dropped by barges or forced against the clay by hydraulic pressure. And finally, a facing of heavy stone boulders would be added. With the clay banks in place, we were ready for the sand reinforcements. Great pipe systems had to be installed and pressure equipment provided. First, we pumped the sand out of the sea, and then, mixed with water, we pumped it back into the sea against the clay walls of the dam we were building. Gradually, the sand took the shape of a sloping, artificial beach. It was to become the body of a seawall wide enough to carry a double-track railroad, a motor highway, and separate paths for pedestrians and cyclists. But the wall of clay and sand would not long resist the constant pressure of the tides. The top of the dike had to be covered with stone, great blocks of basalt imported for the purpose. For the stone, alone of all the materials, was not to be found in the sea itself.